Hello humans. Today I wanted to talk about this guy right here. This is a Bassett Trim Trio. It's a small EDC style slip joint multi-tool, designed specifically to be kind of just a personal care, cleaning your nails, that kind of a thing. It's kind of neat. These things were fairly common in the 1950s, heavily predating even the Victorinox Classic. Which has kind of become the industry standard in these really, really small slip joint multi-tools or non-locking multi-tools. Extremely common, inexpensive, and very much focused towards just have one on every set of keys, right? You can, you should, perfect. But I do think there's a couple of interesting things about them, and I want to kind of explore whether or not this is still a decent option up against, for example, a classic SD today. So we have three tools set up all on the same pivot there. First tool is this nail cleaning tool. Under your nails, scrape out a bunch of dirt or welding grime or whatever you've got, and a nail file. Nail file's halfway decent. The trim tool is actually, the cleaning tool is actually pretty good. Yeah, heavily offset, makes it fairly usable and very easy to grip for such a small tool. Up next, we have a little flathead screwdriver, very, very useful, along with a bottle opener. And we have some of our stamping here. So, it's USA made. They claim that it's patented, made by Bassett, which is pretty neat. And as far as bottle openers go, it's okay. It's not great. It does hook very aggressively. Like, it actually does come to a fairly sharp point there, so it will remove a bottle without too much difficulty, but so will most things, quite frankly. Although on a multi-tool, bottle opener is one of the most common things you're going to use, so that is definitely a plus. And then we have our sheep's foot blade and some more markings. Is that upside down? I genuinely can't. There we are. So that is our US patent number on this particular little guy. Obviously, design patent, there's not too much that's revolutionary or breaking the world here, but it is a neat little multi-tool. So first thing first, blade. I would have preferred the blade be in the middle instead of on the side, but you do what you can. Sheep's foot blade, it's not chisel ground. A lot of these inexpensive multi-tools, like a chisel ground blade, because it's a little bit easier to do. This is not, in fact, a chisel ground blade, and it even comes with a little bit of a sharpening choil there. So if you want to, you can sharpen this down, and you will want to if you use this. This is not very good steel. It's theoretically stainless, which has been working very well for it. But it's extremely, extremely simple steel, which is kind of what you can expect. Again, this was a budget item back in the 1950s. They're long out of production now. They're still very easy to find because there's tons of them around. Snap-on has some branded ones. There's a couple different branded versions of this. But I have just the classic Trim Trio stamped version, which I think is pretty damn cool. So yeah, little blade. Surprisingly enough, you actually get a fairly usable amount of length out of it. I haven't measured this before, but you're talking like, oh wow, 1 3/8. Oh wait, yep, about 1 3/8 of sharpened edge from the 12 all the way there. Worth of sharpened edge, not quite 1.5 inches, but pretty damn close. With a total length of 1.5 inches from scale to tip. So that's, I mean, for such a small, compact item, just under 1.5 inches of blade is pretty damn good. It's fairly, like, one, the pivot itself is fairly tight, which is partially a product of its time and partially a safety mechanism, but two, there is actually a slip joint mechanism in here. Now, it operates in a kind of cool way. You can see cutout back there, and then this bit right here actually moves very slightly. Doesn't have a super strong like snap or anything like that. Again, the pivot tightness is doing a lot of the work here, but I do think it's kind of neat that they fit sort of a integral slip joint mechanism into this little guy. You can access 2 of the tools from the outside with no problem, that being your nail file and your blade. Often all 3 tools come out instead of just one at a time, which isn't the end of the world. And then if you want to get to your bottle opener, you have to open one of the 2 tools up and then pull it out, which isn't a huge deal, but is something that is worth considering, I suppose. We have 2 holes where you can fit a slip ring through. Personally, I'd recommend using this one back here just because it's a little bit closer to this empty section, like closer to the back, so it's a little bit easier to fit a slip ring onto. But you can also fit stuff through the pivot without any difficulty. If you have like one of those ball chains, it works really, really well for that. It's interesting to use something from the 1950s for a little while. I got this for, I want to say $250 at a garage sale. Like, this was a very inexpensive purchase for me. And for that, I do feel like I got a lot. So real quick, I'm going to compare it to a knife that's kind of in its class, the Victorinox Classic SD. And I mean, you get very similar handle ratio. You get a little bit of a different blade shape. This one here is definitely a little bit of a sheep's foot blade. But on both these tools, you actually don't have very much blade height, which I think is kind of interesting. More robust grind on the trim trio. Take that for what it is. I'm not going to do a sharpness test or anything like that because, again, this is extremely inexpensive steel, and this has been around since presumably late 50s, early 60s. So this thing's been kicking around for quite a while. But yeah, very, very similar size to the Classic. It predates the Victorinox Classic, and it does have 2 of the same tools, being the knife blade and the nail file. And to be perfectly honest, if I had to EDC one of these, like as a primary tool, I would take the bottle opener over the pair of scissors. As a complementary tool, I do think that the scissors are a better bet. I think that scissors would be more useful as a complementary tool, but if you only get one of the 2, I would actually pick the trim trio. Personally, just because the bottle opener and little flathead are just more useful to me, along with having a proper nail cleaner on the end instead of what Victorinox uses for their flathead screwdriver. Yeah, it's small. It's very cute. I do think that this would see an interesting resurgence. Just as a hyper inexpensive multi-tool and as a bit of a competition for the Classic, Victorinox Classic, because I do genuinely think that this tool set would be more useful for me. And I think quite a few people would find more use in a little bottle opener on their keychain rather than a little pair of scissors. Very, very clean aesthetic, folded over steel. These did come with lots of different branding. Trim Trio can be replaced by a ton of different things without any difficulty. It's just stamped. Yeah, it's a neat little historical blade. I do definitely think that if you have the opportunity to pick one of these up cheap, it can be worth it. They're kind of cool. And a useful addition both to a small multi-tool collection, but also just to a knife collection. Yeah, kind of neat little EDC guy from the past. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.